Okay, Sean Esbjörn-Hargens.
Great. Am I live?
Yes.
All right. Hey, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks, Thomas. And I'm really excited as part of the CIHS, faculty and leadership team. Really excited that we're hosting this event on campus. So thank you, Stuart, for you and your partnership with the Center for Consciousness Studies. It's very exciting to have such a sold out event and a lot of people online. And it's just been a great day so far. So I'm going to be talking about weird realities. A lot of you have been sharing research that you've done, and you're kind of reporting out some of your results and some of the theories that are emerging out of that work. In contrast, I'm going to be sharing with you research that I'm in the process of launching. So hopefully in a couple of years, we'll be able to get back together in an event like this, and I can share some of the results. Because I'm wanting to use this research to really explore many of the quantum theories and neuroscience models that we've all been discussing today. And also kind of my approach is I tend to start with the phenomenology, particularly the weird experiences that people have, and then from there begin to explore the neuroscience and quantum ways of understanding or substantiating some of that. I've been very inspired by the work of Dr. Jeffrey Kripal, who's based at Rice University in Texas. And this is his most recent book, The Superhumanities. And I won't read this whole quote, but I'll just paraphrase it. He's essentially talking about his graduate students and how many of his students have their own anomalous, extraordinary, paranormal, and superhuman experiences. And they are lamenting that they don't have a school where that is really embraced and taken seriously. And so Mr. Kripal has done a lot to kind of advocate for, including these kinds of experiences in an academic context. And so he proposes this idea of a school of the superhumanities. But he acknowledges here at the end of the quote that in today's academic landscape in our current university educational system, it's really impossible given the epistemological frameworks and ontological assumptions. And that's why I think this revolution that we're talking about today and this weekend is so important, because we need to really open things up and really consider new epistemological and ontological vantage points to understand consciousness and its relationship to reality. So inspired by Kripal, I really began to think about what would be my dream PhD program that I could create and lead. And about a year and a half ago, with the support of CIHS, I launched that, essentially created kind of my own little Hogwarts for the 21st century in the form of the School of Integral Noetic Sciences. And it's an online and campus-based accredited MA and PhD program where, among other very cool things, you can study and research the links between consciousness and anomalous realities, which is going to be the focus of my presentation tonight. So in the program, we really aim to support students to work at the meta-theoretical intersection of science, consciousness, subtle energies, and anomalous phenomenon. And students are encouraged, and faculty as well, to be engaged in their own advanced trainings in spiritual, esoteric, somatic, and contemplative practices, so that we're really exploring our own consciousness across those, modalities and bringing our direct experience into a scientific investigation around consciousness. And in that space, I really love mixed methods, especially edgy, what I like to call edgy mixed methods, where we're drawing on indigenous, integral, anomalous, and feminist methodologies to really challenge what we mean by methods and how we practice science. How can we be more self-reflective in that process? And all of this is really about cultivating global consciousness, often through grappling with the big existential questions like what happens after we die, are we alone, and so forth. And this is really geared towards exploring and pioneering new models of consciousness and reality, many of which have been shared today. And then within the anomalous studies concentration, which is one of the two formal concentrations you can do in the program, Students research the transformative potential of people's extraordinary anomalous experiences, and there's a number of them listed there. And then we scientifically investigate through mixed methods research and through the 2 labs we have on campus, anomalous realities and the relationship to consciousness and subtle energies. My experience and my research suggests that subtle energies play a big role with a lot of what we're talking about today. So I think there's a lot of room to incorporate models of subtle energies into what we're exploring. And then, talking about the philosophical and ontological implications of anomalous phenomenon with respect to the nature of reality. So this really highlights anomalies, anomalous experience, right? Things that are outside our typical, realm of day-to-day, consciousness and awareness and experience. And Peter Sturrock, who taught astrophysics for a long time at Stanford, has this great quote: "Anomalies should be the lifeblood of science. Niels Bohr once said that progress in science is impossible without a paradox." And Richard Feynman once remarked that the thing that doesn't fit is the thing that is most interesting. And more recently, Jan and Dune have written, "Good science of any topics cannot turn away from anomalies. They are the most precious resource, however unrefined, for its future growth and refinement." Thomas Kuhn has been invoked already a number of times today, for good reason. He had a lot to say about anomalies. Normal science ultimately leads only to the recognition of anomalies and to crises, right? And so I think, the study of anomalous experience has an important role to play with the revolution. And it only takes one white crow, as William James would like to remind us, though unfortunately, it doesn't seem that even a white crow, tends to budge the scientific materialist orientation. And so when you study worldviews and belief systems, you come to appreciate that sometimes it takes a lot more than just one white crow, though in principle, it should only take one white crow. So the revolution of neuroscience, in my opinion, really needs to study or include as part of its approach the study of anomalous cognition, because it's really some of the most interesting expressions of consciousness are found in the experiences of anomalous realities. And so you say you want a revolution, and I was pleased that song was playing when I first logged on to the Zoom space. There's a lot of interesting cultural trends that are highlighting that the revolution is happening, right? We don't even have to start it. It's underway, but we can contribute to it and participate and help move it forward. There's amazing stuff being done with psychedelic research. We heard from Travis tonight about some of that. I'm also very intrigued by the work at Johns Hopkins around DMT entities and people's interactions with those entities. The legalization of marijuana is opening up a lot of interesting doors, exploring, the medical uses and just a culture becoming more familiar and open to altered states of consciousness. There's a ton of meditation brain studies. There's interesting neurotheological research. The whole transformative technology movement is very interesting, and looking at how we can use technology to alter our consciousness and experience different types of realities and anomalous phenomenon. Jeffrey Martin, Dr. Martin's research, which you'll probably hear about, I think it's on the 3rd day he's speaking, his finder's research of non-symbolic awareness is very fascinating in this context. Robert Bigelow's highly visible postmortem survival of bodily death contest and all the interesting papers that came out of that. And then Gary Nolan's basal ganglia research. And I'll just double click on Gary for a moment. So he's a professor of immunology at Stanford School of Medicine. He's also one of the top 25 inventors at Stanford. And over the last few years, he's done some groundbreaking research on individuals who have hyperconnectivity within their basal ganglia, in particular the caudate putamen, which appears to act as an antenna for anomalous information. And so when you see those white little lines in the middle of the brain diagram on the right, according to the research, the more of those white lines you have, the more likely you are to have anomalous experiences. And so this has really inspired me to do the research that I'm sharing with you tonight, kind of this high-level overview sketch of it. because I was really intrigued by this idea that there might be structures in the brain that, similar to the meditation studies that show how the brain changes over time with meditation, that there might be practices or genetic dimensions or other contributing factors to different brain structures, either being in place or developing over time, that support or give way to certain kinds of anomalous experiences. And Dr. Nolan is actually an advisor for the research that I'm going to be sharing with you tonight. There's also a number of great books that have been emerging in the last few years that really highlight that the paradigm is changing. The first two books in the middle and on the left are both put out by the APA. And all of these books really highlight that new models of consciousness are emerging that are looking at the relationship between anomalous experience and neurology and neuroscience, and also really taking anomalous experience seriously and investigating it both scientifically and phenomenologically. And this trilogy of books, which amounts to about, I think, over 2,000 published pages, came out of the Esalen Center for Research, is quite an amazing group of articles that really help lay down the philosophical and empirical and theoretical foundations for how to think about anomalous experience and other modes of consciousness that really go beyond kind of the mainstream models and narratives. So there's a lot happening. We're in good company. There's interesting programs and books and researchers that are really pioneering this revolution. So better understanding the brain's role in anomalous experience and anomalous cognition, I believe, can really be a game changer with our models of neuroscience in the brain. So what is anomalous cognition, right? Here's just a quick working definition. Individuals who experience the world and acquire information about it through non-ordinary modes of awareness that can use but are not constrained by the five senses. Right, so this, highlights some of the non-locality aspects that Hide was talking about this evening. Meditation, extreme sports, yogic cities, subtle energies, multidimensional experiences, dreams, experiencing apparitions, remote viewing, entity encounters, sacred medicines, which we're going to be hearing about later tonight, movement, dance, right, near-death experiences. All of these are examples of anomalous cognition. And so then what's super experiencers? Because that's what I'm focusing on, right? So super experiencers are individuals who experience 3 to 4 or even more distinct types of anomalous events throughout their lives. These individuals have a propensity for some reason to experiencing a wide range of what we would just think of as very weird realities. And sometimes there's a trigger event for these experiences, and other times they just seem to randomly happen. And sometimes they start early in the person's life, and sometimes they start later. So I'm going to briefly showcase 2 super experiencers, just to give you a sense of kind of what I have in mind here and kind of why I'm wanting to study, in effect, the brains and bodies of these individuals. So on the left is Dr. Melinda Greer. She's been a practicing pediatrician for about 20 years. And on the right is Chris Bledsoe, who has been a construction worker in North Carolina as part of a family business. Both are high-functioning individuals. There's no pathology. They're great to talk to. They just are, regular people who just happen to have a lot of really weird experiences, right? And so I find this fascinating. Like, okay, what is it about these individuals and others like them that enable this? And what can we learn by studying their brains and their bodies and their experiences? So, well, before I go to the next slide, let me just explain. So I reached out to both of these individuals just as kind of a informal process. And I sent them an email. I know Chris, I met him at a conference, and a colleague put me in touch with Dr. Greer. And I sent them an email with a list of like all the weird experiences I could think of, because I knew a little bit about both of their stories and that they had a wide range of experiences. So I just thought, all right, let me just make the biggest list I can think of, send it to them, and just have them indicate which one of these experiences have they had. just to try and get a sense of like how wide of a range of experiences are we really talking about with these kinds of individuals. So starting with Dr. Greer, the items in blue are the items she has experienced. The items in red are items she has not experienced. I won't read them all, but I'll just highlight a few. She's had a number of UFO sightings, possible interactions with ETs, have encountered some energy beings during one of her NDEs. She's had 3 separate Bigfoot encounters. She has often seen ghosts or deceased people, especially when she's in the hospital doing her rounds. She has had poltergeist activity. She's had several near-death experiences, several out-of-body experiences. She's had the healings on herself. She's also had the experience of being able to heal others. She's had telepathic experiences, mystical experiences of unity and love, and so forth, right? So quite a wide range. I mean, just way beyond what, some of us have, many of us have, an anomalous experience here or there. I know many of my students in the program, the Integral Noetic Sciences, have had, anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 anomalous experiences. But here's someone who's had dozens and dozens over the course of her lifetime. Then when I approached Chris, he had experienced everything on my list except for body marks. Sometimes when people have anomalous experiences, different kinds of body marks and bruises show up. That was the only one he hadn't had, which made me wonder, what else might I have put on the list that he would have confirmed he had experienced that I just didn't think of? So the whole approach here is to basically find 100 plus of these individuals, study their phenomenological experience of these, anomalous phenomenon, and then look at the subtle energy and neurological and brain-based dimensions of themselves. And so there's a number of phases and steps in the research, starting with surveys, then in-depth interviews, doing psychometric assessments, and then brain analysis, and then subtle energy assessments. So phase 1, I'm hoping to launch early in the new year. I'm hoping and aiming for 500 or 5,000 surveys, take about a year to get all of that. Phase 2 will be the in-depth interviewing and psychometric testing. So we'll identify 100 or more individuals from phase 1. We'll do 1 to 4 hour interviews so we can really get phenomenologically thick descriptions of their experiences. And then we'll also run them through a dozen or more standard psychometric assessments to establish normalcy and rule out pathology. This will be a 1 to 1.5, maybe 2 year process. Here's a list of some of the psychometrics that we're considering. Here's the rest of that list. So there's a lot to choose from. We're looking at the similar research that's been done with anomalous experiences, just to see what they've done, and working with our advisory board to just narrow it down to a really solid set of assessments. And then phase 3 is going to be selecting 50 plus individuals from phase 2 to then go into this round with neurological imaging, brain analysis, subtle energy assessments, and this will be a 1.5 to 2 year process, most likely. So I currently am in the process of finalizing an advisory board of over 20 individuals with various disciplinary, theoretical, and research backgrounds. If you would like to be considered for this role, please contact me. Your assistance in ensuring that the study is as methodologically and theoretically robust as possible will be much appreciated. We have an opportunity to do some groundbreaking research into the nature of consciousness and its relationship to reality. There's my email, and I'm sure it's available in the other materials from the conference. So the goals here, I'm just wrapping up the last few slides. The goals of this research is to better understand the unique psychological, phenomenological, neurological, biological, and subtle energy markers and conditions of anomalous experience, to explore the biological, experiential, emotional, cognitive, and spiritual dimensions of super experiencers, provide my graduate students hands-on research experience, review, revise, and develop new models of the relationship between neuroscience and consciousness, Again, much of the work that's been showcased earlier today. And then to help normalize and lift the taboo around the experience of weird realities. I've had a lot of weird experiences. My students and even our faculty have had weird experiences. As far as I can tell, a lot of us have weird experiences, and yet we very rarely talk about it because of the taboo and stigma involved with such experiences. So I'm really hoping to kind of dismantle that. So join the neuroscience revolution, study anomalous experiences and weird realities. Thank you so much, and have a great dinner. And I look forward to the rest of the presentations this weekend.
Thank you so much, Sean. And right at time, I think we have time for a couple of questions, quick questions.
Great.
You had your hand up first.
Great talk. Now, you commented on, you were talking about the uncommon, which is people who have these experiences, but there's something much more common, and that is why more people don't have these, and why when people do have them, the parapsychology literature is full of this, the effects are small, they're hard to replicate. And the reason for that is that the brain actually blocks these phenomena. It blocks psi. So this is a filter hypothesis. But the thing is, I'm a neurologist, and I've studied patients with focal lesions, and we found that patients with lesions in certain areas, left medial frontal lobe, show these effects. So what I did, because you can't get 100 people with focal lesions, use TMS to inhibit this area. And we got a replication in healthy people who ended up showing these are mind-matter interaction effects. We replicated what we found in brain lesions. That's actually one of the on-demand videos here at this presentation, at this session. So what I'm really trying to say is, psi is extremely common. It's just that we evolved with our brains to suppress it, because the world would be a very different place if we would be just distracted, and it would be very hard to function. So I think yes, we should look at why these individuals have enhanced powers, but what is much more common is why everybody doesn't. And the reason everybody doesn't is because our brains evolved to inhibit these phenomena. So I would really urge that kind of research as well.
Thank you. Quick response from Sean.
That's very compatible with the kinds of hypotheses and explanations and considerations we're wanting to explore. So I'm really glad that you've highlighted that, and I'll check out that video.
Maybe one more quick question.
Okay.
Oh.
Any presenters that haven't brought their PowerPoints up, please bring them to the back. Any presenters, please?
I think it would be very interesting also to distinguish between these weird experiences that happen to people versus people who can proactively, intentionally cause them.
Right. Yeah, and that's part of doing the surveys and then the in-depth interviews, is to get clear on who falls in which of those categories. And then when we move into the neuroimaging and the cell energy assessments, to have hopefully some from both of those camps, as it were, because I think that is a really powerful comparative consideration.
Okay, thanks so much, Sean.
Thank you.
And now some quick logistical points. If you're a speaker and speaking tomorrow or the next day, and you have not yet given your talk to the AV producers, please do that as soon as you can. And thank you for reminding us of the on-demand talks. Please visit them. They're available on demand, online. And we have exhibitors in the main hall, right out here, and also poster presentations outside in the Fountain Courtyard area. And we'll now retire to the Fountain Courtyard area, where we'll have food and beverages and then our evening speaker, Paulo Roberto Silva de Souza,